Hey guys, what's going on? It's Pete Gamboa, and in today's episode we're going to be showing you how I retrofitted the front park assist sensors on my 2016 Chevy Silverado LT. And before I go any further with this, I wanted to preface this with the fact that this will require some module programming. So what I've done is I have taken a module here. Now this particular module is from a 2014 or 2015 module. This blue input connector is the input connector for the front sensors, and I believe the center connector is for the rear sensors, and then the first connector is the interface to the actual truck itself. So in my truck I do have the factory rears, so I've got these two connectors loaded, but not this third one. If you go to take the module out of your truck with rears only, you will not have an input connector here. This will be blank. So I went ahead and picked up this module. I did have to get this module programmed by whiteautoandmediaservices.com, so check them out at whiteautoandmedia.com. And so what I've done in my test here is I've created a wire harness that essentially goes from the module to the actual sensors itself, with the ends to actually plug into the sensor. So I went ahead and found the OEM harness from GM, and this part number here is 23274031. And before I went out and bought the harness, I actually tested this first to make sure that it worked. So I made my own harness. I found the connectors and the terminals, and I actually did some tests after I got that module programmed. So now that everything is working, we're going to get it installed. I'm going to show you how I'm going to be installing it onto my truck. This particular harness is a harness that is routed in the bumper, and it ends just behind the bumper there. And then we're going to have to get that wiring routed all the way to the passenger side, to behind the passenger seat in the back. That's where this module lives. So we're going to get that hooked up. I'm going to start with taking the bumper out first. So we have to remove the bumper and the grill so we can get the wiring harness out, and then we'll go from there. So I wanted to show you where that module is. And if we come here to the backside passenger seat, behind the seat here on the back wall, you can see the module is right in there. And so my module has just this black and the gray connector. There is not even the option for the rears on this module. So we're going to be removing that module and installing the new one. The wiring, I'm going to presume, is going to run down the passenger side door sills out to the engine well, and we'll get all the terminals landed accordingly. So for the wiring itself, there's going to be a total of 6 wires. You're going to have 1 wire for each of the sensors. You've got 4 sensors. You've got a left middle, a right middle, and a right. So you're going to have 1 wire for each sensor. And then you'll have 2 wires. One is a low reference signal, and that's going to hit each of the sensors. And then you're going to have another circuit that hits each of the sensors. So a total of 3 wires for each. You'll have a main signal, a low reference, and then one indicating the actual position. So the actual upfitter manual that I have is page 969 of the 2016. This is going to be the same from what I've looked in for 2014 to 2017. So I just wanted to point out the wiring for this. And again, you'll get the OEM harness that plugs into the bumper, but you'll need to know the wiring to go from the bumper back to the actual module itself. So there's going to be 2 junctions. There's going to be a junction right behind here that you're going to have to land terminals to, and that harness will run to about here next to the main battery, and then from the main battery junction back into the back of the seat. So we'll get that wired up now. To get started, I'm going to go ahead and take the grill out and take the bumper out. To remove the grill, we're going to remove this top cover. You've got these little plastic holders. Just pry those up, take those off all the way across, and that'll take this front cover off. To remove the grill, you're going to have 4 10mm bolts up here at the top, so take those 4 bolts off. And on the back sides of these, you'll see a little lip here, so you just need to lift up and out. The rest of the grill is held on by retainer clips at the bottom and I believe the middles. So once you get the 4 bolts off, just lift up and pull out towards you. Grab here in the center and the bottom and pull this out towards you. You should be able to get the grill off pretty easily. If you have the eliminated bow tie like I do, don't forget to disconnect the connector up top before you pull the grill out so you don't yank that wire out. These are the retainer clips that I was talking about. So you have 2 on the side, and you have retainer clips along the bottom here. So just make sure you pull those out with even pressure as you pull the grill out. Now that we've got the grill removed, we can get started on removing the bumper. To remove the bumper, you're going to have 4 18mm bolts here. You have one here, one down there, one there, and one there. Underneath the bumper, you'll have 2 15mm bolts, and those are going to be underneath this area here. You'll see a bar that goes across, so we have a bolt coming up and 2 bolts on this side. You only need to take the bolt on this side, on each side. Once you've got that 6 bolts removed, disconnect that connector, and then that bumper should just slide right on out. Now, I could probably replace the harness right here, but there's going to be some tight cavities back here that I won't be able to get into, so I think I'm going to go ahead and take the bumper off, and we'll take a look at that on the table. As we look underneath the bumper, this is the bar I was talking about, and that is your 50mm bolt you want to take off. I used to take these 2 bolts off here on the right, but I found it much easier to take this one on the left off, and this bumper just sits on top of that bracket and bolt right here. So we'll take that off on both sides, and that should allow us to slide the bumper out. So now that we have the bumper ready to remove, I'm going to show you this harness here real quick. So this is the harness that feeds the fog lights, and as you can see, there are only 3 pins in this harness. So the new harness will have all the extra pins needed for the sensors. However, the mate side is only pinned to support the fog lamps. So we're going to need to get this connector pinned with the missing circuits. This harness runs, this is a main engine harness, so this runs and actually branches out both ways. So this one here runs to the left, runs up the fender, and lands right there. So we're going to need to make a connection here, and from here we're going to take our circuits from here and run them back to the back seat on the passenger side so we can get that landed onto the module. Now that we've got the bumper off, we can begin removing the harness to the fog lights, working your way all the way down. This is the harness we're going to be swapping out with our replacement harness, and just remove these clips here as you go. So installing this harness, I noticed that the harness is symmetrical, so I wasn't sure if this was with the correct orientation or if it needed to be flipped. And so in looking at this drawing, I noticed that the left sensor has a violet with a white stripe wire, and I've got that violet with the white stripe wire on the right side, so I actually need to flip this harness. That needs to go to the left. So just something to take note of when you're installing this. This harness does look symmetrical, so we want to make sure we're feeding the correct sensors. If you're having issues getting these guys off, use a pry tool like this. If you don't have a set of bezel removal tools, guys, get yourself a set, because these guys are invaluable. Just use the back end, push it in like so, and then just come in from behind and pop them off. So if you don't have these, get these guys. They're really helpful. Alright, so I've got that harness in the bumper now, and before I go to reinstall this bumper, I'm going to start doing some exploration on the mate end of this guy here, this connector. So we're going to go ahead and get that taken a look at and see what is needed to get this to mate up. So the terminals for this connector here appear to be the same terminals as I use for the headlight terminals. So this particular terminal is going to look like this, and the terminal part number for these guys are 33012-2003. Now if you get these from Mauser, they do have an LP designation that stands for just loose piece. So if you find this part number here, 33012-2003, that should be what you'll need to get this guy pinned. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add 6 wires to this. You're going to have 1 for each of the sensors, plus 2 wires that the sensors will share across all 4. So since I made this temporary test harness before I started this project, I think I'm going to go ahead and reuse this, since I only need a short wire run from this connector to the junction there by the battery. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut this end off. I'm going to crimp some of those terminals on. Since I did this using wire colors that I've already documented, you can kind of see all the wire colors. I'm just going to go ahead and reuse this harness and get that short run done from this connector over to the battery junction. So I've got my 6 circuits crimped with terminals on the ends, and we'll go ahead and get this guy wrapped with some automotive harness tape and a wire loom, and then we'll get it landed onto our connector. I'll follow the same wire loom path, but I probably won't go inside into the engine well. I'll probably come up the side and up here, and then we'll get it ran to the side of the battery. So let's get this landed. So I've got my harness taped up and loomed up. We are landed on all of the appropriate pins on our connector, so we'll get that landed, and then we'll get this ran over to the battery well. And that's what our finished connector is going to look like. So now all we need to do is just plug it in and reinstall the bumper and wire this guy, route it back over to the battery well. So now that I've got that wire loom routed, I went essentially along the passenger side headlight. I came up to this area here. I think I may remove the air filter here and get this loom routed underneath to follow the existing harness loom. And again, we're going to end up in that cavity right in there into that connector. So that'll be a junction, our next junction. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and get the bumper put back on. So let's get that put on now. All right, so when you go to put the bumper back on, one thing I wanted to point out is there's that 15 millimeter bolt we talked about that you need to remove. And so when you go to put this bumper back on, I'm going to zoom in here, you want to make sure that the bumper bracket goes on top of that bracket so you can bolt it on. When you go to put this on, you may find that the bumper bracket goes underneath that, so make sure it goes on top on both sides before you start putting your bolts on. So I went ahead and took the air filter box out so I can run the wire loom along the edge there, and as you can see, there's the harness that comes from the bumper. And as you can see how it tees off, it actually goes and feeds the rest of the engine bay. So there is no jumper harness that'll get you from the bumper over to the X150 connector there that's next to the battery. So we're gonna run the wire loom just like I did. We're gonna zip tie it along the side, and we'll get it landed onto that X150 junction right in here. The good thing about this junction is that this is the same terminal pins that are used for the door jamb connector for the DL3 tow mirror upgrade. So I've got those terminals. We'll get that landed, and from there we'll make another junction going inside the cabin. So I went ahead and fully disconnected the X150 from the fender there. It had a retainer clip on the side, so I took it out and I undid all the clips to pull it out so I can work with it. And as I expected, we're going to need to land some wires onto this terminal. You've got these little green sealed plugs. We just pull those out, and these connectors are numbered on the back for references. So again, the terminal for these guys is the same terminal as the X600 and X500 door jamb connectors. So I've got those, and the mate will be the same connector, the female end for that. So we're gonna get this landed, we'll get everything zip tied, and then we'll plug this back in. So I've got my terminals crimped on, and the terminal part number for this is 571-964-265-2 from Mauser. And now we'll get that landed onto our connector. So when I tried to insert the first wire, I was having some difficulty, and as I suspected, the pink tab on the inside is a terminal position assurance tab. And so the tab in this connector right in there, this was pushed down, so I had to push it up towards the plastic part of the assembly. So it's a lock. It prevents you from inserting or removing inadvertently, so just have to move that up to get that terminal inserted. And that's what it looks like with all the wires landed. So we'll go and get this guy back in. We'll put the air filter box back, and we'll get the other end of this pinned. And that's what it's going to look like. All zip tied nice and clean for the OEM look. We'll get that connector sneaked underneath the coolant reservoir and into its spot. So in finding the path to run this wire back into the cabin, I found an access hole here on the side, and I'll show you around the front what that looks like. And we're going to be coming into that access hole there on the hinge. There's a rubber round grommet going inside, so we'll use that to bring our harness in, down the door sill, and then off to the back. So I went ahead and popped out that rubber grommet, and I ran a piece of red wire through, and I found it on the inside, so I'm going to use that as my path to run my harness through. I went ahead and took the rubber grommet out. I just did a cross slit on it, so we'll use that. That should hopefully make a nice seal going through the hole into the cabin. So I've got that harness loom ran along the door sill. It's this black wrapped loom there. So it's running all the way through to the back seat. So now we just need to take that rear seat off and get that landed onto the new module. Now that I've got the wire loom back to the back seat of the truck, I will need to remove the seats, or at least the passenger seat, and to do that you've got 4 bolts here, one on each corner. These are 18mm bolts. You have one here, one in between the seat belt, you have one in the back, and one in the back left. In addition to that, you've got these 2 10mm bolts right here, lower and upper, that hold the seat in to the driver's side back seat. So we're going to get those off and get this seat pulled out so we can finish running our wire harness to the back of the seat. So I've got that harness loom ran underneath the trim molding piece, underneath the carpet, and we're right here. So I'm going to go and take out my old module, and as you can see, there is no input for the front sensor, so we're going to replace it with the newly programmed module. We'll get our harness landed according to the drawings, and we'll put everything back together. Now that we've got our wire harness ready to be crimped, we're going to be crimping on this blue 14-way connector. This part number is 15491263. If you cannot find the actual OEM connector, you can get the service connector 151270038. The terminal pins for this I'm using is going to be from Mauser 1452653-1 or 145267-3, and we're going to get these pinned just along the same wire colors that we used earlier. Alright, so I've got my connector terminated. We're ready to plug in. Before we do that, I wanted to show you the differences here. So the one on the left is the original park assist module. This only has the input for the rear sensor and nothing for the front. And the new module has the input for the front. So if you were to get this and actually install it without the programming, I could not get it to work. So I reached out to whiteautoandmedia.com and explained what I was looking at accomplishing, set the module out, got it programmed to my VIN, and now it works and is registered. So pretty excited. I'm going to go ahead and get that guy plugged in now, and we'll get it tested. And that's what it looks like all installed. So let's get the seat back in and let's get it tested. So for this X150 connector here, we're going to be landing our wires and terminals using part number 962943-2. There's also a 964263-2 variant that you can use for this, and we're going to be landing our 6 circuits here. This harness was a little bit of a pain to take apart because of this guy here. Just look on the inside and you'll notice some tabs here and here to remove this guy out, and that way you can get to the back side here. So we'll get those terminals landed and plugged in and tested. For this guy here to get the terminal position assurance tab unlocked, let me zoom in here. Down here at the bottom you'll see a pink tab. You want to get a small flathead screwdriver and you want to pry that down towards the bottom here. So we'll get that unlocked and then get those terminals inserted. So the pink TPA actually comes completely out, so you can open up the cavity to get the terminal inserted. So go ahead and take that all the way out and get your terminals inserted. This is what it looks like when it's completely landed. So now we've got all our circuits there. We'll wrap this up with some electrical tape and get it put back together and plugged in. So I'm all wrapped up here at this junction. Everything's put back together, nicely zip tied and wrapped alongside the harness, the OEM harness. Alright guys, now that we have everything back in place, let's get it started and get it tested out. So in reverse, you can see the front sensors activated. I'll go to drive, zoom in here a little bit. And as we move up, our sensors are picking up. And as I go to reverse, there's our rear sensor. So everything is working as expected. Pretty excited about this, guys. So again, thanks for watching. If you have any questions about this video or any of the other videos, please let me know. Please like and subscribe when you get a chance. Until next time, guys, this is P. Gamboa. We'll see you later.